Hello, everybody. This is Michael Lewis here, and I am the producer of Versus, which is vocal engagements regarding society's underlying systemics. Apologize, the words are being swallowed with the mask. That's our new norm. Today, I have Judge Sandra Cabrina Jenkins. She'll be a speaker this Tuesday, August the 11th. And some of the things that we're going to talk about is will and trust. I have family law, which is estate planning. However, you personally are 23 plus years in regards to criminal attorney. So you don't have to stick to any subject matter that I actually formulated in the beginning. Honestly, as an attorney, one of the reasons I wanted to ask you is because of your diversity as an attorney, as well as a sitting judge here in the city of New Orleans. As you all can see, Judge Jenkins is running for Louisiana State Supreme Court Justice, which we'll get into a little bit more. But systemic racism to me, over the last couple of months, we've all experienced what this pandemic has basically stopped our lives. And some of the things that have hindered the Black and brown community is systemic racism, and these things have been put on the forefront for a lot of people to actually now pay attention to, including myself. And Versus was a brainchild of mine last year, where this year I actually just dove into more of what systemic racism is. And what I saw, the analogy that I use is you take the yellow pages. The yellow pages back in the day had names and numbers in the front of it, and then it had basically all these different jobs, or not really jobs. You basically, in the yellow pages from A to Z, you had places, attorneys, barbershops, beauty salons. You would find these careers within there, are people to do these things. And systemic racism to me was the hindrance of all those other things. Black and brown people were in the front in the white pages, and it was like, yeah, you really can't be an attorney. Yeah, you really can't leave out of this real estate. Yeah, your medical and health and wellness ain't that important. So it was kind of built, it was a system built to kind of repress us from actually moving forward. And just throughout all that, especially as far as criminal law, as an attorney, well, a former attorney, and as a sitting judge, I would love for you to give me information on how you've seen this system. Well, I know you have to be biased as a judge.
Unbiased.
Unbiased, yes, unbiased as a judge. Can you give me some examples of how systemic racism has probably hindered our people from moving forward in law itself? I'm gonna just say law itself.
Okay. First, I want to thank you for including me in Versus. I think it's an awesome vision that you have to be able to have dialogue with the community about things that we typically don't get together as a community to discuss. We may discuss it in the barbershop, we may discuss it getting our hair done in the salon, women, but for us to have a community dialogue is extremely important. Systemic racism in our judicial system exists, and we have to go back and look at history. A lot of times people want to ignore, for example, the Jim Crow era and say, oh, that's over with. What does that have to do with this right now? But recently, our U.S. Supreme Court has acknowledged that many of our laws, especially in criminal law, were based and deeply rooted in a racist system. For example, our most recent case from the U.S. Supreme Court is Ramos versus Louisiana. And in that case, Louisiana and Oklahoma were the only two remaining states that allow a non-unanimous verdict. For example, you can be convicted for a felony with a 10-2 verdict. 10 jurors saying guilty,
Wow.
2 juries saying not guilty. All across the country, we see other states, they had done away with that a long time ago. The federal system, even in our Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, it talks about how criminal proceedings should go forth. Louisiana decided that we didn't want to do that. So, in April of 2020 this year, it was declared unconstitutional any conviction that was a 10-2 verdict in the state of Louisiana. So now we're seeing those cases come back to us to the appellate court. I serve on the Louisiana Fourth Circuit Court of Appeal.
Okay.
And we are a court of error, so it is our job to review cases, not retry cases, but to view to see if there's error in the law, error in something procedural through the district court. So those cases are coming back now, and basically the convictions are unconstitutional, so those convictions are set aside and remanded back to the district court. And the district court, the district attorney makes the decision on if those cases should be tried again. So, I mean, this is 2020, so you're talking about decades and generations of convictions of persons that were unconstitutional. The other issue that we hear about traditionally are our bail bond system. And in our bail bond system, you also go back to actually slavery. And when slaves were free, of course, that affected the economy of the country and the states. So they had to figure out a way, how do we get free labor? You know, we've lost that now, or some of the jobs that we need to have done, we don't have the bodies, the personnel to do that. So anyway,
it basically created a system in law to get free labor by penalizing those that weren't able to fight the judicial system in a sense.
Well, I'm only talking about the bond system.
Okay,
I'm just talking about, for example, they may pick up someone on a Friday for spitting on the sidewalk. And they would say, okay, you can get out of jail if you have $50. And unfortunately, sometimes they didn't have the funds. So they would allow them to work off their bond, or to work off what their penalty and fines would have been, for example. So historically, that is kind of how that system got started. So when you look at that, our law, the statutes in Louisiana say that a bond is for the purpose of assuring that that person appears in court. And there is criteria that the district court judge has to look at. You can look at the dangerousness to the public. You can look at whether or not they're flight risk. But generally, all a bond is supposed to do is to make sure that the person will appear. It's not like guilt. It's not saying you must be guilty, so therefore your gun has to be this, that, or the other. But I'm proud to see and say that in Louisiana we have seen reforms in that area. But those are just a couple of examples that I can get a little bit more into on Tuesday when we have our forum.
And these are, not to cut you off, but these are things that come on the ballot for us as citizens to vote on. So one of my biggest initiatives with this movement that I want to try to get people to understand is we have to be counted. And like right now it's the 2020 census, and a lot of us in our community, for some odd reason, we feel as though we don't want government in our business. But if you have a 2-month-old that's going to be 10 years old from now, then you need to know that that child has been accounted for. So filling out the 2020 census is one of my big things as far as a big push. And I think the deadline, well, actually on August 11th, if not August 12th, they're going to start knocking on doors for those who haven't filled out the 2020 census. So being counted is one of my biggest things. Being heard. The reason I asked about these things on the ballot, because we only pay attention as far as citizens, I think, other than this election, to the presidential and not the local. And most people really don't understand, like, you running for Louisiana Supreme Court, and you have more impact in our community than what the president does when it comes to being as a sitting judge, even where you're at now. And people forget about that. They don't look at local politics as being a big deal, but it actually starts on a local level, because these are the people that we are trusting to reform all the things that we need reform across major boards. So, I mean, I'm just not really dumbfounded, because quite honestly, as I hear about cases like this, or cases through the news where someone 20 years ago, I think, overheard the conversation, I didn't read the article, but the young man who was arrested and got life for hedge clippers. Like, that is ridiculous. And that's part of reform and putting the right people that has the ability to look back at that and say that wasn't right.
Well, and I'm glad you raised the issue of it's not only important to vote for the president. The reason a person can be convicted for taking hedge clippers and be sentenced to life is because they were a habitual offender, meaning that they had maybe they had 3 prior convictions, and this was the 4th conviction.
Yes.
So in the discretion of the district attorney, that district attorney decided that they wanted to multiple bill that person, and the law allows it. So who are we looking at? We're looking at our legislative bodies. It is extremely important who we elect in the U.S. Senate, the U.S. Congress, state Senate, the House members of the state representatives, because they're the ones that are putting forth these laws. And we've always had this, candidates sometimes think that they have to be tough on crime and put forth legislation that does that. And we are finding that those tables are turning slightly. A lot of the very harsh sentencing has been removed. But we still are having issues with who's in the DA, not issues, I'm not gonna say that, I can't be political here. It matters who's in the district attorney's office, it matters who's on the Supreme Court, it matters who your district court judges are. And judges, as a judge, I am not an advocate. I'm an advocate for the Constitution of the United States of America and for the Constitution of the state of Louisiana. My interpretation, based upon what is presented before me, looking at the historical factors of why these amendments came forth or what have you, that's a part of my job of judicial deliberation. And when we go in to vote for a judge, we have to understand that it affects our lives. It affects the well-being of our society. Louisiana Supreme Court is the court of last hour. There's nowhere else to go in the state. It's the final say, until you go into the federal system. But it matters your everyday life. The Supreme Court decides death penalty cases, for example. If someone is sentenced to death, it goes straight to the Supreme Court for appeal. It bypasses the 4th Circuit Court of Appeal.
Wow.
The Supreme Court makes decisions on statutes that are declared unconstitutional. It bypasses the 4th Circuit Court of Appeal, goes straight to the Supreme Court. So it's 7 justices, and the state is divided into 7 districts.
Yes.
And there's only 1 minority district in the state of Louisiana where we can count on at least one of those justices being representative of the minority community.
Yes.
And the rest of the state, right now, there are 6 white male justices. And that's not representative of the state of Louisiana. It's not. It's
not diverse. One of the things I like to point out to a lot of people, and I'll be political here, is I have this ideology of just observation. We have 2 types of voters. You have Democrat, you have Republican. You have people like myself in the middle that are registered independents. The state of Louisiana is a red state, it's a Republican state. However, in those areas, like you mentioned, the other 6 districts, it's predominantly white males that have been placed in those positions off of past history, systemic bias. Other qualified candidates may or may not have had the funding or the representation, or may have been oppressed where they can't move forward. And when you have the city of New Orleans that is so diverse, where even majority of the registered Republicans think democratically because of the diversity that the city offers. We have neighbors that are of different races and different backgrounds, where in these other parts of Louisiana, again, I'm not gonna get too political, but I mean, the history of Louisiana, it is what it is. You have that good old boy system that exists there. Speaking on this district and what you're running for, you're absolutely correct. When we need representation of someone that has a diverse outlook on what today looks like, not someone that had been on a court 20 years ago with that same, 3 fines and you're out, boom, you're out, boom. That system of thinking is dead, and I think people right now are hungering for politicians that aren't politicians, individuals that are individuals and are human first. And this is where this platform is going to be important to me, because I have no political agenda other than in this conversation actually using you as an expert to talk to the folks who listening on, well, dang, I didn't know it was that biased in the criminal, or didn't understand it to that point, on how from the DA to the bail bonds to the judge, it's broken in certain parts, because the system is broken. And until we get out and exercise our right to vote and get out, like the DA of Orleans Parish, thank the Lord he ain't rerunning, because I don't understand. I've been home 6, 7, 8 years, and this dude has been crooked his whole career. He's always having scandals, but yet we continue to vote him in. I don't understand that. That's just me on a rant, y'all. That happens. But I have another question on just in regards to, as a practicing attorney, if you are able to elaborate, are there any examples that you can give specifically that can put a face to an example of biased racism with someone? Like you mentioned the story that just was published as far as the guy with the hedge clippers, 3 strikes. I personally, as a man, can't understand how a person can get life for stealing hedge clippers, when even if he had 2 other offenses that were worse, or if not the same, that level of punishment is justified in a criminal court system. There had to be circumstancing. It could have been drug addiction that this person was on, abuse. There could have been a number of different other treatments that may have helped this person, but we're just gonna go straight to a DA saying, hey, no, we're gonna give this guy a life for that. That to me doesn't make sense whatsoever. So are there any other examples that you know of, as far as that you, well, crap, you're not an attorney any longer, so I just heard myself ask a question. I'm not trying to put you in a loophole.
Okay. Well, I can talk a little bit about some of the things you just asked about. What happens, the sentencing judge, for example, they don't have a lot of discretion if statutorily they're mandatory minimums and or a multiple bill of information to enhance that sentence has occurred. There are instances where the defense attorney can argue that it's an unconstitutional sentence because it's excessive in light of other persons that have been similarly situated and sentenced for a hedge clipper, for example. It's like they didn't get that kind of time, and looking at the background. But judges, I think a lot of times, we definitely want to comply with the law. We definitely want to interpret the law as it is intended. But I'm going to give you a perfect example how a court system was able to overcome that. And this happened years ago with the difference between crack and powder cocaine in the federal court system. There began to be very aggressive pushes by the defense bar and by others in the community that did not understand why is this person that has this amount of crack sentenced for more years than the person that has the powder.
Yes.
And when you look at the numbers and the statistics, you saw that it was people of color or people that were poor. So I was still practicing at that time when I started seeing this shift. And I was appointed as a criminal justice panel act attorney, meaning that I would be appointed to represent indigent persons that were arrested that can't afford a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
So lawyers began to file memorandums and say, court, this is what the statistics say, there's no reason for this. And judges began to sentence below the mandatory minimum. And it just started like popping up all over the country, and the Eastern District of Louisiana began to do the same thing. Congress had to finally act and take out those differentials between powder and crack, because it had no reason to be there. And it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was during the Clinton administration that all that stuff started going crazy, and we won't talk about that.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's an exciting example where judges begin to hear and begin to say, you know what, that makes sense, that there's a disparity here. So, one of my favorite quotes, I have it in my on my website. In the Ramos case, it says that, and I'm paraphrasing, judges can't be afraid to be wrong. No, judges have to accept that they will be wrong at times, but when they see wrong, they can't perpetuate wrong. And they were talking about the overturning the case that had stood for all those decades to say that it was okay to have a 10-2 verdict. So they had to go through that history and talk about Jim Crow and talk about following the precedent. Usually that's what courts look at. It's like, okay, what have we said about certain things? And whatever we've said about those things, we try to follow it. So I can talk a little bit more about that on Tuesday as well, because I have an example of a case that I authored on the Fourth Circuit where I'll talk about that Thursday.
Okay.
Tuesday.
I'm gonna pause for a second.
Okay.
Just to kind of give you a second to get your mask together.
I have in my notes.
Did it stop? Okay. So, a lot of information, a lot of great information actually. One of the things I've learned doing the few interviews that I have done, Judge Jenkins, is asking my audience to sit down with pen and paper. Because as we have this organic conversation about systemic racism and now criminal reform and just law in general, these are subjects that it should be a lot of aha moments that I want to personally have happen within our community. I want people to be able to sit down and think in their mind's eye on someone or somebody that they know that may have been affected due to an old law that was on the books, or a system that they felt that may have been too biased towards, or just too harsh towards someone that wasn't, and it may have been an example of systemic racism. So I guess picking up on some of the conversation that you had, one of the questions that dawned upon me in regards to old laws that have been, especially Louisiana, there's probably so many countless examples of laws that was written in the 20s, 30s, 40s that have nothing to do with what today's America looks like versus what the old America looked like and who ran it. how do we, as citizens of Louisiana, Eastern District, City of New Orleans, get policy changed on older laws that have been outdated, if not amended? Like you mentioned, what happened in the 90s under Clinton's administration when judges had those aha moments, and then legislation and so forth changed because in legalization of marijuana, which has been a hot button topic, but it's an example of reform now. How once was being demonized is now being accepted. How do we as citizens, I guess, have the power of changing that through vote, or is that just something that law officials or policymakers do?
Well, first, it starts with the vote, being informed about who wants to be your representative in whatever capacity. Judges are not representatives. Unfortunately, it's kind of awkward because we have to go through the political process to be elected, but we're very restricted on the things that we can do, even in our own campaigns, but also we can't be political and support other candidates and different things like that. But making sure that you're informed about who you're voting for, making sure that you hold them accountable. Holding your representatives accountable means showing up at the hearings, showing up at the committee meetings during the legislative session, showing up in chambers with the city council, and knowing in advance what's on the agenda, what is important to me and my family and my community. And you see it now with the Black Lives Matter movement. Policy is being changed right now, not just governmental policies and issues, but when you look at corporate America, when the major Fortune 500 companies came together and pulled ads from Facebook because they didn't like the policy and what Facebook was doing with whatever that policy was. They didn't like it. So I have never seen that in my years. I'm a 60s baby. So by the time I was old enough, segregation was off the books per se, but you still saw it.
Still felt it.
But in my time of observing the civil rights movement on through the years, I've never seen corporate America move the way they've moved. I've never seen the professional athletes, that the owners do the things that they're doing now. So that's because it was a voice of people that came together and said we've had enough. So yes, the community, individuals can make that difference in policy, and we are experiencing it today.
One of the things that I've realized, and I say this quite often, is like you mentioned, you are a generation that came after segregation. Today, our kids have so much access without understanding. And I tell that to a lot of people because it is so easy for individuals now to basically be able to Google this and find that, but without the understanding of what it was. And it's important for me to continue a tradition that I've held in my lifetime. I always look for those who know more than me. I use this analogy that Oprah used: if you're the smartest person in a room, you need to find another room. I use that often because that's the only way that we're going to grow. You can't be stagnant around people that know less than you, because you're not being challenged to know more than you. And you're absolutely correct, because I use the example, this country wouldn't have got shut down if the NBA didn't say, I'm shutting it down. We're no longer doing anything. It was business as usual. And to a big corporation or big conglomerate like the NBA said, no, we have a player that tested positive. And then you saw the orange fella decide that he wanted to start implementing stuff. But it was companies like that, and examples of like Nike right now. Nike has one of the more powerful commercials I've ever seen, where they have a split screen of athletes of all different races and games actually just synced. I got chills just not thinking back on that commercial. So we definitely have to be empowered and informed and practice our voting rights in order to put the right people in place. In regards to your court right now, what court are you currently presiding over?
I serve on the Louisiana Fourth Circuit Court of Appeal. We are an intermediate appellate court, meaning we're the next step before the Supreme Court.
Okay. So you guys definitely hear a lot of different cases. And is it just you, or is you and multiple other folks?
It's 12 judges that serve on our court, and our court's jurisdiction is Orleans Parish, St. Bernard Parish, and Plaquemines Parish. So we review all cases from those three parishes, and we are court of error, meaning that we review cases based upon errors that the litigants have assigned and said the trial court committed this error, and we make that determination based upon the record. Many times we have oral arguments, and many times the attorneys want to do what they call submit on the briefs, meaning that we are just looking at black letter law, we're looking at paper, we're reading transcripts, we're reviewing, and then we make our determination, and the end result is an opinion. Our court sits in panels of 3, 5, or 12. We never sit individually, and even our state constitution says that to be able to reverse a district court, the majority of the panel has to agree, meaning all 3. If all 3 do not agree, it's a 2-to-1, then we have to pull what we call a 5-judge panel, and then that majority doesn't have to be 5-0. But it has to be like 3-2 or anything higher.
So it's definitely not a court of judicial bias where it's just one singular person making that decision. And you all mediate amongst each other, talk amongst each other, and then come up with a decision. I'm asking because I'm glad
you asked that, because even the lawyers are, they want to know, how do we deliberate and different things like that. So we don't. I don't compromise. I just put it that. Let's start there. I don't compromise. So what happens? We review the cases. We know in advance who is the writing judge, but the lawyers don't know. So we have oral arguments, or we submit everything on the briefs, and then we conference afterwards, and each judge expresses their position. And the writing judge writes the opinion, and the other 2 panel members either will agree with that opinion, or they will agree with the result of it, but they may have reached it a different way, so they call that a concurrence. And then you can have a dissenting judge, which does not agree with the opinion at all, and they write a separate opinion.
Okay. And that's kind of where diversity comes in, as far as I have a lot of different examples of sayings, y'all, so just excuse me. It's kind of like how you and I can witness one event, but see it from 2 different angles.
Right.
Because our viewpoint may have been obstructed, or I paid attention to certain things that you hadn't. And I guess with running for Supreme Court, this kind of sets you up for that. Is it the same format?
Well, the Supreme Court, all 7 justices sit all the time.
Okay.
All 7 justices sit. So you will have a writing judge, but their system is a little bit different from ours. I mean, their process is a little different.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to my notes and ask a question.
Yes.
I definitely, for you all that don't know, Judge Jenkins is running for the Louisiana Supreme Court as Louisiana Supreme Court Justice for our district, both Orleans and Jefferson Parish. Right now, there are 6 other sitting members, all male Caucasians, representative of the state of Louisiana. If you want to find out more, currently her website is, what is it?
SandraJenkins.com.
Okay, so you all can find that information on SandraJenkins.com or on her Facebook and Instagram page, which is SCJ for SCJ. That's SCJ, which is Sandra Cabrina Jenkins for Supreme Court Justice. So it's simple, SCJ for SCJ. The reason I share that with you all is experts like this within our community that we hold to high esteem. I want to be able to touch and pull that knowledge out and let you all be able to hear what they're saying as far as systemically what has hindered us in all different arenas. So you can have an aha moment. You can encourage your kids or your grandkids or your brother or your sister to go out and vote so you can be heard. But pivoting from that, and the reason I asked about that information was, what impressed me more is the pro bono work that she actually does, or had done as a practicing attorney. I apologize. As a practicing attorney, you did pro bono work with the homeless and the veterans here in this city and state, or was it national?
Oh, it was in New Orleans, in the Orleans area.
In the New Orleans area. And the reason I was impressed with that is because that's something that's from the heart. You know, when someone volunteers their service to help the disenfranchised, that's something that God put them in it, put them with. That ain't something that the judge say, you are mandated to go do this. So with that, did you see a lot of systemic afflictions happen to those two parties? As far as, because systemic doesn't, I guess in my head, it's not just black and brown, it's the system itself.
Right.
Are there any examples as far as with the veterans? I'll start with them, and then you can answer however you want with the homeless or veteran population that really hindered them from getting that leg up.
A lot of the work the organization did that I volunteered with had to do with, one of the basic things was trying to make sure that they had identification. A lot of times we ended up notarizing a lot of documents for them so that without their proper identification, they couldn't apply for certain benefits, they couldn't apply for certain jobs, they couldn't, well, jobs, period. Or housing, they had to have ID for housing. So just the simple basic things that we did a lot. And I eventually became a certified VA claims attorney, meaning that the veterans that were having problems trying to get their benefits and go do their paperwork rather, so that they can make a claim for whatever they needed to make a claim for with their benefits. I was trained and certified to help them with that. So it was very meaningful for me to do those types of things. I did a lot of community service. I call it community service, or civic involvement with a lot of, mostly children. But for me, that was a very special population, considering that they sacrificed and served our country for us, for our freedoms and our comforts.
Yes.
And a lot of times when they come home, it's just not what it should be. So that's the least I could do, is offer my services to help them re-enter comfortably in back into the community and get them those things that they needed to do to get that start back.
You know, that's very profound, because at the venue that I'm a managing partner at, I do a lot of retirement ceremonies with both Navy, Marines, and Coast Guards. And I've learned to joke with them in a way of, they train you up for 6 weeks plus to be this person, but they don't train you how to be back a citizen or a civilian. And for a lot of them, what I saw is, if their retirement ceremony was January 1st of 2020, they officially didn't get out of the military until 4 months later. So they can be at home decompressing from their military life. They, in a sense, they have been institutionalized themselves. And it's one of those things that a lot of people do take for granted, that although they volunteer to be in that service, the level of stress And just the, I mean, even that's a whole nother conversation in itself, because I honestly didn't realize the detachment of the person from the military to the father to the husband, because of the fact they're absent for so long. And it's kind of like they live there, but they don't live there. So I definitely applaud you for those times that you did as a practice attorney, volunteer to help them, because I'm quite sure you have countless stories on the lives that you have touched with that. So even with that, one of the reasons I asked Judge Jenkins is because she is very, very diverse in everything. So I'm hearing that part, and all I can think is just your humanitarian services. You have Judge Jenkins law camps. Can you speak on that? And the reason I'm asking you to do that is, for a person that practiced law for over 23 years, you've been a sitting judge since 2012. That's almost 30 years. 31 years of law experience here in the city of New Orleans. To give back with the law camp is, as you all heard, a lot of the examples of recognizing how the system, I'm not going to use the word system, is broken, but probably flawed. And I guess the law camp is to teach the next. So I'm going to let you elaborate, because I'm making assumptions and I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No problem. Actually, I said what really triggered the law camp was the Ferguson incident. And I was just so tired of listening to commentary on the news, misinformation, and people just not understanding the judicial process or the district attorney's role and responsibility. So
I'm sorry, that was Mike Brown, Ferguson. Oh, that was Fidel Cabrina.
No, it's not. Well, I'm just gonna say Ferguson, and we're gonna
Yes,
figure out the name.
I'll figure out the name later on.
And unfortunately, it's been so many that we gotta rewind and figure out which one was that. But
Right.
It was the Ferguson incident, and I did a well, that was my second law camp. But anyway, I did one called cuffed uncuffed, like handcuffs uncuffed. So my goal was to bring in, and I brought in different three parts. I have Justice Without Bias Law Camp, and that traditionally covers my criminal justice reform camps. I have Law Society. Oh wow, look at me. The Civility of Civics. And that's where I spend a lot of my time at the schools and talk to the kids about government and the role of being a citizen and different things like that. And law spirituality. And what is my third one? Law spirituality. Anyway, it's a marriage between law and my ministry.
Okay.
So the reason I did that, because when you start looking at some of the social ills that necessarily a court can't deal with, but as a judge, I can open my doors and educate in the community. We did a lot with young women and girls as it relates to violence against women and girls, human trafficking, all of the issues that we kind of standing in court can't address,
right?
Because it's not the right place.
Yes.
But we can come back out into society and talk about those things.
And these are programs that you have created and implemented within the community?
Yes, I have created community forums since 2015.
Okay, that is very, very powerful. And I'll piggyback off of some of the things you said in regards to these shootings. Like many of us, especially African American males, I have found myself at the gun store buying guns and bullets, like I'm ready for World War III. My wife is very terrified of my attitude right now, but it's the level of education that empowers us over anything else. And I say that because I took a concealed gun class, and when I took the class, I was informed on how the law would view me as a concealed gun carrier more harshly than a person that didn't. And this was coming from the instructor, who's also a law enforcement in Jefferson Parish. And it's because of going through the class, you taught properly what you can and can't do when it comes to utilizing your weapon. You know, we all have these attitudes that I'm gonna just shoot somebody if they come knocking on my window. No, you can't do that. Your life has to be in immediate danger. And those are part of policies and policing on other days, because I want to do the same thing. I want to be able to bring in professionals that understand the law and be able to articulate to the people that want to know what it is what it is in a lot of these cases where you haven't seen justice, but also understand how you can protect yourself going forward. So I don't want to see that type of incident happening in New Orleans or Orleans Parish. And I'll leave with this, because I did hear you talk about your ministry. I now walk around, because Louisiana is an open carry state. So I walk around with my gun holster on me, open. It's just like the police. It's holstered. I don't have a magazine in it or anything. But I want you all to listen to this and pay attention to what I'm saying, and you can chime in. As a black man walking around with a gun in an open carry state, even in a suit and tie, I'm considered a threat to even other black people, because it's not the norm. But yet, we can see a person of another ethnicity, I'm gonna just say white then, we can see a white male walk around with a gun on them in a Walmart or something and just think that this is just a redneck. We have to change the way society views black men, because I've been looked at more harshly by other black people being afraid, even in, like I said, suit and tie, or I'm a detective or something, to be like, wait, and then I say, well, you know, Louisiana is an open carry state. So as long as you're doing safely and correctly, you can carry your gun out. Oh, I didn't know that. It starts the conversation up. So I commend you on that, but we're gonna sign off on in a bit. I did hear you again, the ministry part. How long have you been a licensed minister? Wait a minute. I was not ready for that one.
I've been doing ministry for probably the last 20 plus years, but I was just licensed in December.
Oh, okay. She's been ordained by God since birth. That's all that means. I just legally went on ahead and did the paperwork.
Well, the church does that.
Yes.
They bestow that upon you when they give you right.
So, I mean, one of the things that I definitely love about you is your diversity as a human. From practicing law for as long as you have to pivoting to being a judge. The humanitarian side of being able to look back and say, I'm going to help the disenfranchised. And the fact that you have a foundation that's grounded in God, just kind of like, it makes to be a judge, that's the perfect person I would want to be in front of. Because that individual, quite honestly, has a vision of everything. You know, I didn't talk about education or anything like that, because I'm quite sure you could talk about all those things. Our conversation specifically was about the law and systemic biases. But I do appreciate you for your service.
Thank you.
For decades. Oh yeah, we got an elbow. I forgot. We got an elbow.
Look at you like,
Look, we got an elbow. I went with the handshake and he went, no. See, she made sure I made a justified decision. So is there anything you would like to at least leave the audience with? Now again, Tuesday we will be live, August 11th, with Judge Jenkins. You will be doing presentations on what again?
I'm going to dialogue with you and the audience as it relates to systemic racism within the judicial system.
Okay.
And some of the things that the court is doing to address that.
So I need you all to actually submit as many questions as you may possibly have, as humanly possible, so you can get answers that you need. This will be found on Facebook and on YouTube. So it'll be archived, so you all can listen to it as many times as you need. You can always send questions to the Algiers Auditorium community page. I will try to get those questions answered for you. I appreciate you all listening. I appreciate you all watching. Judge Jenkins, I appreciate your time. As you can see, we living in a pandemic world, but I need you all to be counted. I need you to be heard, and I need you to be informed. I'm trying to inform you. The other two are on y'all. My name is Michael Lewis, and I thank you again.
Thank you.